decisions, great mound visits, great job not letting the best player beat you.
This one crushed, out to right field. And it's going to be out of here. Pennsylvania walk-off home run. Travis Devonic sends him to Williamsport.
With the 37th pick of the 2023 MLB Draft, the Detroit Tigers select Kevin McGonigal, a shortstop from Monsignor Bonner High School, Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania.
2 balls, 2 strikes to Bryce Harper. Suarez delivers. Swing and a drive. Left field. It's deep. It's gone. Yes! And it is gone!
Yes!
It is bedlam at the bank as Bryce Harper has put the Phillies on top.
Are you kidding me? Oh!
His 10th career home run in the postseason. And he may never hit a bigger one.
What is up, Delaware County, and welcome back to another episode of Delco Baseball Now. My name is Brennan Ricciardi. Unfortunately, our good pal Ben Thorpe could not join us today. He is inspiring the youth of America by coaching a travel baseball team for All-Star. I'm not exactly sure where they are, but unfortunately, he is not here with us today. So we are going old school today. You know, for the first, I would say, probably about 20 to 25 episodes of this show, it was just me in my college apartment, you know, talking into my microphone by myself. And you know, it's kind of cool to get back to the roots here. I love having Ben here, but you know, go a little old school is something that I don't really get to do too much anymore. But it's good to you know, to go back to the roots a little bit. So we're just gonna get right into it here. You know, we got a decent amount to talk about with high school. Unfortunately, Wednesday was rained out. Thursday was rained out. I think there was one game on Friday, which was Chester, which we'll talk about. But you know, there wasn't too much to get into, so this is probably going to be a little bit on the shorter side for episodes here. But you know, I think when you think about what has happened over the past week or 2 weeks of Delco baseball, you have to start with Strath Haven because they're the team that, you know, last year won the Central League by 4 games, won the district, and lost in the state championship. You know, a lot of people, even including myself, thought that there could have been just like a little bit of a drop-off in terms of how they, you know, were so dominant throughout most of the season last year. Lose Alex Pock, lose Sam Milligan, you know, lose your third baseman, Nick Cortor. Like, what was the team going to kind of respond after such a tough loss like that, knowing that you lost a pitcher of Pock's caliber as well as a hitter and Milligan? But to be able to go out there, you know, they won their first game against Devon Prep. We recorded last Thursday, so we didn't really get to talk about either the Haverford School games or the Marple games. But for the team that started our, you know, year off at number 3 in our rankings, to be able to go into the Haverford School, which at the time was ahead of them, they were 2, win that game on the road, come back on Monday, go into Marple, who was also a top 5 team in the rankings, go on the road, win that game in dominating fashion, is super impressive. You know, I think we all knew that Luke D'Ancono was going to be, you know, the type of pitcher he is. He's definitely taken, in my opinion, a big jump between what we saw in that state championship game against Shaler when he was around 85 to 86 to now his junior year at Marple closer to, you know, 88, 89, almost touching 90 for the first start of the year. Super impressive to show out that. I mean, he had 6 shutout innings in that Marple game. He added a new pitch, so he has his fastball, but he also has, you know, he had kind of like I still kind of get confused on what a sweeper is exactly, but long story short, he's got a hard horizontal moving pitch and a bit of a slower horizontal moving pitch to kind of mess with the timing because he doesn't really throw like a changeup or split or anything that kind of goes, you know, like 12-6, like that type of movement. So, you know, he did exactly what he, you know, wanted to do on that mound. He was getting ahead. It felt like every single count was 0-1, 0-2, leaving hitters in a tough spot to chase some pitches that they probably didn't want to chase, but that's what happens when you get ahead. And I think also when you look at this Strath Haven team, you know, outside of Jake McDonough, really there aren't true like power, like there aren't really a lot of power hitters. Like, you know, no disrespect to the Haverford School field, but like let's be honest here, like the balls that Zane Malarkey and Jack Schuster hit were, you know, they were great swings. They might have been doubles, but they, you know, most fields they aren't going out. Jake McDonough's was an absolute bomb to dead center, and the thing is they don't really need to have a full lineup of power hitters to get to where they want to go. That's not Strath Haven baseball. So having a lineup 1 through 9 of guys that can get on base, Ben Milligan moving from 9 to leadoff has, really, he's picked up right where he left off. He's an on-base machine. Then, Malarkey's always getting on base. Matt Cain, McDonough will drive him in. Jack Schuster coming up from JV. Like, they kind of got a 1 through 9 team where they're just like a bunch of pests at the plate. And they scored 4 in the top of that first inning against Marple to really set the tone. And, this isn't like a who wanted it more, but like the Strath Haven energy, man. Like, some people were saying because it was the Delco Baseball Now game of the week that there was just like more juice to the game. I can't confirm or deny that. I'm not on the field. What I can say is that there was a great turnout at Marple. And, it just felt like, I don't know, it just felt like it meant more a little bit. But last thing I'll say on Strath Haven before we move on here is also very impressed with the pitching depth, because when you lose a guy like Pac, who is a Division I talent, to be able to almost replace him in the aggregate, little money ball line there, to be able to have guys like Rob Matei, Caden Schuster, even Jake Kudrick like available in that bullpen role leads Zane Malarkey to be able to stay at shortstop where he's I'd imagine most comfortable, and provide that second, because you'd imagine Luke will probably start about half of the Central League starts. That leaves, especially on the weeks where you play 3 games, it's pretty rare, but especially in those weeks, you need to have those second and third and even fourth guys, and it looks like they're in a good spot to do so. So it's pretty hard if you're a Strath Haven player, fan, family, whatever, to be upset with the start to the season. 3 wins against 3 solid teams, and we'll be talking about these guys again in the power rankings. Next up on the list, we got Sun Valley. So Sun Valley played a great game with Carroll. I was watching that game on Game Changer. When they were on the show, they basically said it best, that they are a gritty group that, no matter what the situation is, they're not going to stop battling. And in this game, they were down 2-1 going into the 7th inning. They got one back in the 7th. They were able to send it to extras, and our guy Justin Hickman was sitting right in that middle chair over there. He delivered a big knock up the middle to make it 3-2. They would add one more on, I believe, a bases-loaded walk, and they closed that one out. Shout out Ivano Romanello for being a submarine pitcher. That's one of those things where, again, like being able to have more time to watch all these games and be able to see and learn more about these teams, is that if I was just looking at a Game Changer like box score, I wouldn't be able to tell anything about him as the player. I can just kind of see the numbers that I'm getting. But I think in 2 pitches, he got the final 2 outs to end that game. So shout out the Sun Valley boys. Sabo Graham has looked very good at the top of the rotation with Holy Family commit Paul Miaza hurt. Jackson and Ryan Messick have both stepped in well. I believe one of them is either a freshman or maybe a sophomore. They're both very young. And, Max Bartolf has pitched really well in addition to that. I think this is a team that it's tough being in such a tough conference like the Chestmont, but I do think that they will be right around that playoff bubble. It's been a while since they've made the playoffs. I think the move to the Chestmont has really shown in baseball that it's such a tough conference to be able to have sustained success, especially with a bunch of these 6A schools like the Downingtowns. It isn't easy, but these guys have a good group. They have a close-knit group, and I think that if they need to win the games that, it sounds kind of easy. They need to win the games that they're supposed to win, or not even the games that they're supposed to win, the games that they can win, because, you're not like penciling some of these games in as losses, but like when you play against teams that are going to be on the bubble with you, like Great Valleys this week, like Westchester East, Ruston, like these teams that are, you're fighting for the playoffs against, you kind of have to be prepared to understand that like those games are going to be the ones that when you're looking back in May and you miss the playoffs by 1 or 2 games, you're like, damn, like that game in March or in April was really the difference in the point system. So I like where Sun Valley's at, and we'll be following along with them as well. We're going back to Monday here because Ridley and Haverford. So this game was kind of funny because in our power rankings to start the season, we had Ridley in the final spot. Then after a really good week, the prior week, Haverford moved up into that 9 spot, knocking Ridley down. And I swear this wasn't intentional, but Ridley and Haverford played each other on that Monday, right after Haverford got the 9 spot. So in my head, I'm like, all right, well, I guess we have a very easy solution for who's going to be in the 9 spot after that game. Just whoever wins that game, making our job pretty easy. but Ridley took that one 3-2. Sammy Brooks had a big 2-run single for Ridley. Brian Cawthorn, another Delco Baseball Now podcast alum, he was sitting right there. He had the game-winning, I believe it was either a sac fly or fielder's choice for Ridley in that one. Chris Kimball fired 6 strong innings for the Green Raiders. John Tian was also on that episode. He closed it out for the win here. Some people are saying that the Delco Baseball Now bump is real. You come on the show, you play better. I don't know. It is what it is. But I'm very encouraged from this performance by Ridley. I think that our biggest question for them coming into the 2024 season was how are they going to replace the top of their rotation. Mike Haberset's gone. Jake Nauman's gone. Who's going to kind of step into that role and, provide the pitching, not only the depth, but the top of the rotation stuff. And it seems like, you would imagine that the guy that starts your first Central League game is probably who you consider, at least to start the year, as your number one. And when you look at Chris Kimball throwing 6 strong innings against a Haverford lineup that had been swinging it. Shane Durkin had been swinging it. Will Tamar. I know there's plenty of other guys that off the top of my head, I'm not going to remember. Nick Alvanian was hitting well, and these guys came in. They had a good performance against, I think it was Interborough and Carroll. So for them to be able to have a performance like that, a very close game, I think both of these teams are on track to have very similar seasons, perhaps the low playoff seed in 6A or right outside the bubble, and that game kind of reinforced that. All right, moving on to another team that I expect to be right on that bubble, whether good or bad, is Pencrest. Right now, I have to lean more towards the good side because of what we've seen from Gavin Brown. He's a starting pitcher for Pencrest. I'm not exactly sure where he plays in the field when he's not pitching. I think third base, but he's going to be starting every other Central League game for them, and he's been fantastic to start the year. Ben had the pocket radar out. I think we had him around 88 in the first start of the year, I might add, against Radnor. I don't believe he's committed to play anywhere. I don't know what his plans are, if he wants to play anywhere, but I would say he's been kind of the biggest, if you want to call it like a breakout pitcher of the early going of the season, because he was good in 2023. He was solid. He was good. It's starting to look like he's very good or great based on what we've seen from him so far. And what I've also noticed for him is he kind of has that psychopath on the mound type of mentality, and I say that lovingly. That's a good thing that he just pitches with a lot of intensity. Like when we were at that Pencrest and Radnor game, it was one of those games where it was early in the season, it was a little cold. It was one of those games where there just wasn't, it didn't feel like there was a lot of true juice around the game, and he kind of had to bring his own energy to try and get the team to play with more fire, and it felt like it was rubbing off on the rest of the group. But he is pitched in that Radnor game, pitched very well for, I want to say, 4 or 5 innings. He threw the first of the 4 of the first 7 no-hit innings against Chichester, with Josh Kalinowski and Mike Pagliacetti closing out the rest of the game. Quick tangent here, 5 combined no-hitters in Delco this year. It's right now, we're recording this, it's Saturday, March 30th in the afternoon. I mean, I got to think the live over-under is double digits at this point. The fact that we've seen 5 already and 4, 7 innings. One was a mercy rule, which, call it what you want. I mean, they didn't let up a hit. It's a no-hitter, whatever. 4 of these have been full games. Haverford High against Carroll, the Haverford School against Germantown Friends and Friends Central. We had this one right here, Pencrest over Chi, and then Episcopal. We'll get to them in a couple minutes here. They had one over a team in Florida. So I don't know what's going on here. You can't really say it's something in the air in Delco because Episcopal did it in Florida. So I don't know what to call it, but it's still a very, very fascinating thing going on here. But last thing I'll say about Pencrest is I'm very curious to see how they do against some of what would be considered the upper echelon Central League teams, the Strath Havens, the Lower Marions, Marples, the teams that were up there going into the season and also from last season, to kind of see where they stand, because we've seen them against Radnor, we've seen them against Chi. EA didn't go very well, but as we'll talk about, EA is a very, very good team that faced Pencrest 3 or 4 fourth pitchers. So, you don't have to put too much stock into that. Little spoiler here. We do have them outside the power rankings, but I think with a good week this week, they have a very good argument. All right, let's talk about Conestoga real quick, because Conestoga is the team that, when I wrote about them before the season, I kind of said to myself, I'm like, this is the team that has like the widest range of outcomes. Like they could be a playoff team and it wouldn't surprise me. They could also go 4-12 and it wouldn't surprise me, just because there was so much unknown. They lost a lot of talent on the team last year. And James Queasy, one of their, I believe their starting catcher, has an injury right now, so he isn't playing. So you have a freshman catcher, you have a fairly inexperienced team, but the guys from JV have stepped up and really performed. But the key to success for this Conestoga season is going to be what Jake Friel is able to do. He's a big lefty, Sacred Heart commit, a little bit wild in that game against Germantown Academy. It's a good Germantown team, but I think he'll be the first to tell you that he needs to hit the zone a little more consistently and put himself in better positions to to get outs and don't let the command kind of result in big innings, which was the problem against Germantown. But not terribly concerned about him. I know what he can do. He was good in his first outing of the year. From the offensive side of the ball, Chase Ransonen, he had a 3-run inside the park homer. When I saw on Game Changer that he hit a 3-run homer to dead center, I was like, I hope it's inside the park because that's a bomb there. Like, it's a massive field. He had obviously 3 RBIs on that. James Matzinger also had 3 RBIs. They started their season, I should have prefaced that, with a 12-2 win over Upper Darby. Henry First threw 4 strong innings in that game. JP Tinnany closed it out. And I like I said, I almost feel like I still haven't learned anything, more about the way that Conestoga is trending compared to what I knew before the season. I'm still, a little bit confused on what to expect from them, but as we'll talk about in previewing the games this week, I think that they're a team that once we see them against some of the better rosters in 2024 in the Central League, we'll kind of get an idea. All right, I'm surprised it took this long to get to these guys, but the reason I saved it is because they played a little later in the week down in Florida when other teams weren't going on, is Episcopal. So another reason I actually wasn't really sure is because what confused me was, so Episcopal's games in Florida count. Other teams don't, and the reason for that is because they're non-PIAA. So from my understanding, games outside of Pennsylvania, I guess they're just considered scrimmages. I don't know if that's like a cut and dry, no matter what, that's like the situation type thing. But at least here, like when, Lower Merion went down, Harriton, Marple, Bonner, like all these PIAA teams, I think Carroll was down there, they all just count as scrimmages. But since Episcopal is non-PIAA, they're in the PESA, I think they're allowed to count it. And, their accounts, their everything, they're tweeting about these games, talking about their record. So as of right now, they're 9-0. They won all 6 games they played down in Fort Pierce, and they beat High Point High School 8-5, Gil St. Bernard 21-8, 4-2 over Stillwater, 10-4 over Stillwater. But it really gets interesting on the last day of their trip when they took on Plainage and Lawrence Academy. So they, as foreshadowed above, they had a combined no-hitter. It was Michael Cadden for 4, I believe Reggie King for 2, and Roman Nataro for 1. I might double-check that real quick. I know for a fact that those 3 were the pitchers that were involved in the game. Michael Cadden definitely started and went the first. I want to say 4. Let's test my knowledge here. We're pulling it up right now. It was against Plainage, which I believe is a New York school. Yep, we got a Cadden for 4, Reggie King for 2, and Roman Nataro. We only had 2 walks, and I don't believe any hit by pitches. Real quick, though, shout out the Episcopal pitchers for their command in this game, because not only did Michael Cadden throw 43 pitches, he threw 35 strikes. 35 strikes to 8 balls is crazy, and quick math will tell me that's probably around like 80% strikes. Same thing, Reggie King, 32 pitches, 20 strikes. Roman Nataro, 9 pitches, 6 strikes. Very impressive for these guys, and it's a coach's dream, to be able to have that kind of command. You're ahead in virtually every single count, and that's a very, very good recipe for success. Talk about the offensive side of the ball here. We knew that this team was going to have a lot of talent, returning, like D1 guys like Alex Barris, D1, Lafayette, Tyler Beaulieu, D1, Cornell. Jack Hurta, D1, Maryland. Jake Verbitsky, I'd imagine will play a very high level of college baseball based on what we've seen from him, and not only him, from Kyle and the genes in the family, but they've also had some new guys that have been able to contribute to that returning core and really complement them. Owen Pfeiffer is a guy that's kind of worked his way up in the lineup. Spencer Shue has been a guy that I didn't really know much about going into the season, but it feels like almost every write-up I'm doing, I'm typing in his name, like, oh, he did something again. And that's why it's good to have these Florida trips where you've already played 9 official games and you're able to get these guys a bunch of different work that when you're playing a Central League public school schedule, you might not be able to do so to let these guys show out. Timmy Dennis as well, he's back, another returning face. He's been doing really well. Got to give a quick shout out here to Michael Schaefer, who, according to the Episcopal Twitter, is actually in 8th grade, and he got the save in that win over LaSalle, which was, I want to say, last Wednesday maybe, before they went down to Florida. So super impressive to be thrown in, in any game. You're in 8th grade, and to go out there and take on a team like LaSalle, who is winning, PCL championships and state championships all the time. It's an incredible program. And to go out there and get the save against that team for what I think was his first pitching action, I'm not sure, it's the first that I noticed, is super impressive and just shows how highly they view him. And it's another thing that I think Ben and I might have talked about in the last episode, is that since they're non-PIAA, I think they're allowed to be able to have these guys that are in 8th grade be able to come in and perform. Because, as I think we said, if you can have a guy that's over 18, a guy that's playing a grad year, then I don't see why you wouldn't be able to have someone that's younger than most of the guys on the field as well, as long as they can perform. All right, we're going to stay in the Interact. We're going to go to the Haverford School here. It's a team that is 6-1-1 on the year. Their only loss was to Strath Haven, who's the number 1 team in the rankings, so I don't think that's anything that they should really be, upset over. They fought back in that game. It was 7-3 going into the last inning. They made it 7-5 with the bases loaded, so they definitely showed some grit there. They beat 2 very good teams this week. They beat Father Judge, a team that just won the 6A state championship for the PIAA. They won the PCL championship. Lost a lot of their guys, but it's still a good program over there. Ian White Jr., 11 strikeouts in just 4 innings of work. One unearned run in that game, but to go out there and pick up 11 of your 12 outs via the strikeout is super impressive. I would say right now he's probably been the most impressive pitcher in Delco. You got to put him up there with Van Wilner, put him up there with Luke D'Ancona. Ironic that both Ian and Van are committed to East Carolina to play their college ball, but Ian, he just he pounds the zone and he has very good off-speed stuff. It's a good balance between getting people to chase, but also being able to pound the zone, and he's done a good job with that. Can also swing the bat a little. He had the first Delco baseball high school home run of the year in their win against Germantown Friends, but he's going to be a very, very important piece to this already good Ford's rotation with guys like Kevin Reevy and Fred Jordan. They've had some other guys step up and pitch. Connor Haney, Brandon Dunbar, Brenner Green. This is definitely a deep team. I think overall their offense has been good, not great, and I think that's fair to say. They've had some performances against Garnet Valley, where they're friends, Germantown Friends, where they're putting up double digits. But I think overall they're more of a pitching heavy team. I still think their offense is good. In that Father Judge game, Brenner Green and Connor Scanlon both had 2 doubles. Connor Scanlon drove in 1 and Green drove in 2. And both of those guys kept it going throughout the week. Unfortunately, the rain chalked their game against the Hill School on Wednesday. But on Tuesday, they played Ruston. They won 3-2. Fred Jordan pitched 4 1/3 solid innings in that game. But Brenner Green and Connor Scanlon, they both doubled again. I believe Green I think he's a junior. I know Connor Scanlon is a senior that's committed to Fairfield to play his college ball, which is Division I. Brenna Green is a junior, so they got 2 more years of him over there in Haverford. But I think he's a very exciting player, and I think this team is it's definitely a team that I think could compete with Malvern. I'm not sure that they're gonna. It's weird. I'd mentioned it in the written previews, that I think Malvern is probably the team that's best built to win the Interac, like the Interact Championship, like over the course of 10 games. But this is a Haverford School team that anytime they have one of their big three pitchers on the mound, I do like their odds, and I think they can match up with anybody. So I'm if I had to make my official picks, I think that DraftKings might not have the best odds for Malvern Prep based on their recent success, but it's hard not to choose them. But I do believe that if this Haverford offense is able to truly click, they, like I said, they've been fine. But, the last two games, 5-3 wins and 3-2 wins, right? And they scored 5 in their game against Strath Haven. I don't know if they're going to be a type of team that's like consistently putting up, massive, like Garnet Valley, they're scoring 19, they're scoring 12, they're doing whatever. But I do like this roster, and I think they're going to be near the top of the power rankings for a good chunk of the season here. Let's talk about a team that, quite frankly, I'm not really sure I expected to have much airtime this year, and I hope that's taken the right way, because it's a team that has really shown that they're trying to build their program up, and that's Chester. Chester's a team that, you look around a lot of other sports, there's a lot of great athletes that play at Chester. Football and basketball have been the two sports that they've been consistently contending at, and especially of late with the Harris twins, like the Chester football team, all-time great district championship in that game against Strath Haven that I was covering. But it's a program that has they have the prowess. Like, they're a very good sports program, but baseball hasn't really followed suit in that. So they have a new head coach, Jamal Martin, and it's like it's just the little things. Like, it's the little things that you have to do to try and build the program up to get more people involved. They started the Instagram page, Chester High Baseball. They got a Game Changer, which I think, along with Chi, they're the only teams in the Del Val that actually use Game Changer. And they're scheduling more like non-conference games, while other teams, maybe like Academy Park and Penwood, they're kind of just playing the Del Val schedule and going from there. But they are really, in my opinion, doing a great job at trying to build this up. And all of a sudden, they have a year where they either make the playoffs or they take a game from Chichester, take a game from Interborough, whatever. That convinces more people to start coming out in the future, right? Like, there's guys that I'm sure there's guys that go to the school that have the talent to play on the team, but they think, we're not going to be very good. Like, what's the point of doing that? So I think that it's not going to happen overnight to build a program that's a consistent contender every year. But they're absolutely taking the right steps to get there. This week, they took down Academy Park. They had a very close game. It was a 6-5 win. Larry's Cardona had 9 Ks on the bump. For Chester, Jemai Brown went 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs. Jacoby Roman also drove in 2 runs as well. I believe Chester had, I want to say maybe like a 6-1 or 6-2 lead. Academy Park kind of rallied late, but it wasn't enough to get by. Then they played a school that I'd actually never heard of. It's called Las Americas Academy. I'm going to guess it's in Delaware. Okay. Las Americas Academy. They won that game handily. They 10-runned them. I think it was 17 to maybe 3 or 4. Shout out our guy Larry's Cardona. He had 6 RBIs in that game. He homered as well. And I'm very, very, very curious to see how Chester does against Interborough. So they play Interborough this week. I think it's on Tuesday. Could be on Thursday. I'll pull that up real quick. So it's actually a good transition here into the next part of the show, which is looking ahead at some of the upcoming games of the week, this upcoming week, ultimately leading up to the game of the week that we will unveil at the end of this segment here. So it looks like Chester will play at Interborough on Thursday, okay, to get their season started, or not to get their season started, to get their first real taste of, I don't think it's exactly a surprise here that the Del Val, Chichester and Interborough have been those top 2 teams flipping back and forth for the recent history. So we got Chester and Interborough on Thursday. The PCL starts this week. So the PCL starts on Tuesday. Bonner will play their first game of the year. They will travel to Conwell Egan. Archbishop Carroll will travel to Archbishop Wood, and Cardinal O'Hara will travel to Father Judge. So all 3 of those Delco teams will be on the road in the PCL to start the season off. And I think the PCL is probably my favorite structure. You play every single team once. The top 10 out of, I think, 13 make the playoffs, and it's just a single elimination bracket, which in my opinion, it gives it that football feel, right? Like it gives you that feel where every single game, A, in the regular season matters, but B, every single playoff game, no playbacks, no losers bracket, no nothing. It's just show up and, put up or shut up. Like show up and give me your best game or not, right? Like I think that last year, I don't think anybody's going to sit here and argue that Roman Catholic was a better baseball team, 1 through 25 or whatever to Bonner, but they were better that day, and that's all that matters. For anyone that listened to our Malvern Prep interview, Freddie Hilliard, the coach, said, the best team doesn't always win; it's the team that plays the best, right? So to be able to go out there and show up, on that one day is all that really matters. So those three teams will get their PCL season started. Unfortunately, O'Hara and Carroll was supposed to be on Wednesday, but that game got rained out. We would have plenty more to talk about if we had more than just like Monday, Tuesday, and at least in PA Friday. So we got some more Central League games this week as well. Springfield will take on Marple, two teams that are currently 0-1 in the Central League, but really don't want to go to 0-2, right? So that's going to be a huge, huge game. Nobody wants to start out the Central League season 0-2. You don't want to dig yourself into a hole. Springfield, it was a game that, I'm not going to necessarily say they should have won against Harriton, but they very well could have. One drop third strike throwaway kind of, halted that game. But, those are both teams that are talented. An 0-2 team from that group doesn't even feel right, but they will get started on Tuesday. We also got Lower Merion and Conestoga on Tuesday, which I would imagine is going to be a battle of two D1 pitchers, Jake Friel and Van Wilner. Probably one of the best early season pitching matchups that we've had really from anybody, in my opinion. That's a great game there. That's two teams that are 1-0 in the Central League. The other way, who's going to get out to that 2-0 start, right? This is the first full Central League slate. It's a nightmare for us, writing the game recaps, but in terms of content and, trying to have as many games going on as possible, it's exactly what we want. So to have one of those days where all 12 teams are in action is, you can't ask for anything more than that. But speaking of one of those Central League games, we are very excited that the game of the week for this week will be heading to Media. We are going to Harriton at Pencrest, a battle of two teams that are 1-0 in the Central League, battle of two of, in my opinion, if they're not top 5, they're absolutely top 10 starters in the Central League. We got Charlie Belli for Harriton. We got Gavin Brown for Pencrest. I would imagine both of those guys will get the start just based off of the fact that, when they last pitched and when they're, next scheduled to pitch, I would imagine that's probably the plan for those guys. But they both looked very good throughout the start of the season, and I think it's two teams that we're both. I think we're pretty high on the fact that we think they can be playoff teams, but it's also a scenario where they could both, once the end of the season comes, right? If they're both around that 11, 12, 13 spot, you're going to look back and be like, this game meant a lot. So to be able to have two pitchers like that, two teams that are 1-0, to get our game of the week continued is something that we think is going to be a very good matchup. And, every week we're going to kind of just look around and see what games mean the most, what games we think have the most kind of luster, little juice around it, the aura around the game. And we think that this Harriton Pencrest game is going to be great. So that is where we are going to be headed. But before we can, talk about what that game means, we got to go through the power rankings here to talk about what the rankings will be for these teams going into this matchup. So we're going to start off batting first at the top of our starting 9 here for the power rankings. It's still Strath Haven. I don't think going on the road and beating Marple, that was their only official game of the week. They were beating Henderson when the rain started to come down, but since that game is probably not going to be made up, that's just going to be considered a scrimmage. These guys are 3-0. They're locked in. It's hard to say that anybody's played better than them at least against the local teams. We'll talk about Episcopal in this list. It's kind of one of those things where it's hard to compare. But at the end of the day, they've beaten two top 5 teams on the road, and based on their track record from last year and what we've seen from this year, it's hard not to be very, very bullish on them for this season at number 1. Number 2, we're going to stick with Bonner. And I think the main reason we're going to stick with Bonner is because of, what we think the talent of their roster has. Now, I know it's a very odd situation when you have, teams like EA and Haverford, like these teams that have played a lot of games. Meanwhile, officially Bonner is 0-0. But if we want to stay consistent with what we believe the caliber of this team is, then, I think that we have to kind of stay consistent with that and keep them at number 2 until they kind of show us otherwise. They were our number 1 team heading into the season. We kind of had to have a discussion after Strath Haven beat Haverford to be like, hey, like, that's the best win that any team in Delco has this season, reinforced by that win against Marple. So I know it's a tough call. It's a very odd situation. Once these games get started on Tuesday, it's not really gonna, matter anymore. So I hope, anybody listening understands that it's just what we believe the caliber of this Bonner team is. And, we haven't really talked about them much in this show, but we'll talk about them in a sec when we get to our college commitments. But they have 2 D1 pitchers in the rotation. They got a D2 pitcher. They got, D1 shortstop, D1 third baseman, D1 left fielder, D2 second baseman, D2 center fielder, D2 catcher. Like we do believe in what we've said about this Bonner team. But our first official change in our interact structure, we're going to put Episcopal at 3. It's hard to deny, when a team starts off the season 9-0. We don't really know much the caliber of the teams in Florida, but for the teams that they've beat up here as well, I mean, that's a huge win over LaSalle. They've got contributions from all across the board. They seem like a very well-rounded group. And this isn't really as much like, it's moving Haverford School down to 4. Like, I don't really think that's much of a surprise based on Episcopal moving up to 3. But this is not an anti-Haverford decision. This is a pro-Episcopal. 9-0 at this point deserves to be a top 3 team based on everything. And, you add in the combined no-hitter, you add in the returning players, and, Haverford School moving down to 4. It sounds like, it's a team that doesn't really feel like they're, only the 4th best team in Delco, but, their wins last week were good, not great. Like, they won some close games against some good teams, but, they didn't really, I don't think they've played their best baseball yet, which is fine because it's March 30th, right? But I think moving them down to 4 is reasonable based off of what Episcopal has done here. So right now we got Strath Haven 1, Bonner 2, Episcopal 3, Haverford School 4. We got another change here. We are going to be flip-flopping Lower Merion and Marple. So Marple moves down to 6, Lower Merion moves up to 5. And I think that the main reason for that was just about how the Lower Merion pitching staff has looked. Van Wilner was fantastic in that game against Garnet Valley. They lost this game to Penn Charter, but Isaiah Negron was great in that game. They only lost 2-0, against a good Penn Charter team. So not too concerned about that loss. Marple moving down, I think it was just, Luke D'Ancona on the mound, like the offense, that's one story. I think the pitching didn't quite look as strong. I know Strath Haven's obviously a great team. I mean, moving them down one spot, like we're still very high on this group. Going forward this season, but it just felt, from what we've seen from Lower Merion, their infield defense was incredible. Their pitching staff looks good. They look like they have a very, very strong top to middle of that order with guys like Jack Scholes and Brody Slensky and Makai Smith in center field. Like they seem like they have a very good group there. So that's a decision that we made. I wouldn't say easily, but a decision that we just felt like we like the pitching of this Lower Merion team, and we think that I still think overall Marple might have the better offense, but Lower Merion's offense, I think, put it like this, I think that the gap between Lower Merion and Marple's pitching is bigger than the gap between Marple and Lower Merion's offense. So that's our rationale for there. Lower Merion 1-0 in the Central League, Marple 0-1. Harriton stays at 7. This was, I think it's still a good spot for them. I know that they're 1-0 in the Central and Marple's 0-1, but, they just based on what we've seen from Harriton, that, some of their non-conference games didn't really have the best showing, and I'm not quite sure how they did overall in their Florida scrimmages, but I just think that both good and bad, they haven't really done much to sway our vision. They won that Springfield game because Charlie Belli pitched incredibly. They didn't exactly, dominate it. They didn't do enough to be like, oh, like we have to move them up, right? just based on what we've seen. I think 7 is a good spot for them. They have a good week this week. Absolutely can move them up. Similar philosophy here. We're keeping Garnet Valley at 8. So Garnet Valley is exactly what we thought they were going to be, right? They're a team that absolutely mashes the baseball, but they have some young and inexperienced arms. Mark Zuppo is a Penn State Berks commit. I think that's more for what he can do at the plate. They're missing one of their best players in the order, which is Chris Schaller. He's a Richmond commit. We saw him at that Garnet Valley game limping. That Lower Merion game limping a little bit. So I imagine something, ankle, leg, knee, whatever. And the fact that the offense has been able to be as productive as they have, even without him, is very impressive. They didn't play any games last week, so it didn't really feel right to change anything, just because there's really nothing to update. They had a non-conference game scheduled against Avongrove, which was actually Dollar Dog Day. More teams should be doing that. Get the people out and give them what they want. But they have not played a game since that Perk Valley game that they won 19-12. So same thing. It's kind of like, what's the point of moving them up or down when they didn't really do anything in that span, good or bad. So I like them at 8. And number 9, this one, they kind of forced our hand here, right? We talked about it earlier. Ridley was the 9. They dropped out. Haverford came in, and what do you know? The first day after the rankings, Ridley beats Haverford, right? It was like the ultimate, Michael Jordan, and I took that personally picture, because they did. They beat him, and they earned that spot back. Don't think they did enough to, leapfrog like other, Garnet, Herod, and other teams like that. But I think that they absolutely deserve to be back in this ranking. I think if Chris Kimmel is able to consistently give them quality starts, they have a very good chance to get back in the playoffs. I think they've made it. I think Danny Stickney said on the show every year since COVID. I mean, he said every year since he's been a part of the program, they've been able to get to the postseason. So it's hard to bet against them. But that's our top 9, and I feel good about the top 9. I hope everyone understands that I put in probably more time than I should trying to figure out what the best combo is. And listen, no matter what we do, I understand that not everyone's going to agree with the rankings, which is fine. I get it. Everybody has their teams that they think should be in it, whether it's a team you root for or just a team that you see and think like, all right, this team deserves to be up there. We're always open to, yes, criticism, but more just like, people saying, like in the comments, like someone's like, where's Sun Valley? And I said back, I'm like, hey, like if they had won that game against Shanahan and started 2-0 in the Chessmont, like they absolutely would have had an argument for that number 9 spot. But we kind of have to, just balance that out with what every other team is doing throughout the season. All right, now that we are done with the high school portion of the program, we're going to do a little transition into the college program. So we're going to talk college commitments, because we had 2 to talk about that happened over the course of the last couple days and the last time that we recorded. So we're going to start off with Johnny Ortega from Bonner. He committed to St. Joe's. Not the first Bonner guy to go to St. Joe's, definitely not the last. Johnny is a pitcher. He is a junior this year. Got some time from them out of the bullpen, especially in the playoffs last year. He's a guy that I know they're very high on. He's a big boy. He's got some juice on that fastball, so he's going to be staying close by to play at Bonner. I believe I do have his numbers from last year. Last year he was kind of behind Harry Carr, Brian Henry to get innings. This year, Corey Sheridan will obviously be their top guy. They also got Johnny along with Rocco Calise. They got Matt Shade, and they can also still throw Harry and Jackson Kehoe if needed. But, to have that 1-2-3 is very impressive for Bonner. We pull up his roster here. Anytime I go back to last year and look up Bonner stats, I just laugh at how good Kevin McGonigal's numbers were, having like a 1,700 OPS for them. So last year, Johnny, he was third on the team in innings pitched with 25. He had a 3.6 ERA, which is incredible for a sophomore. And you got to imagine he's a big part of the picture for this year. So congrats to Johnny. We also got Logan Hamilton from Garnet Valley. And the way that it seemed like the vibe I was getting from their post was that I think he's going to try and do both, play baseball and play football at Stevenson, where his teammate from Garnet Valley, Jack Krautzel, he is also already there. Or I'm sorry, he's not already there. He's already committed there. He will be there it definitely looks like he's going to be playing both baseball and football. Our guy Ethan Marshall from Springfield, I think, might potentially try and do the same thing as well. So congrats to Logan. All right, we've gotten to the college baseball portion of the program here, and if you're hearing Delco and college baseball in the same sentence, it feels like in 2024 you're probably talking about Alden Mathis from Marple, because he is having a career year at Clemson right now. I mean, it's March 30th, and he already has 6 home runs this season. I believe his max at Richmond was 9 or 10, which is, don't get me wrong, especially for a speedy outfielder, is a great season. But, I mean, he's hitting balls 425. Like, he's really showing that, he's probably going to be a draft guy. And, he was drafted in 2022 in the 19th round by the Orioles, when he was still at Richmond, and he declined. He decided he wanted to go back to Richmond for his senior year. I believe they gave him a scholarship, to stay, played there, ended up originally committing to play at Georgia in the SEC for his 5th year. I believe Georgia got a new coach, so he wanted to go somewhere that he knew that he was going to, be able to have the opportunity to perform. And picking Clemson, is a team that they're ranked in the top 3, I believe, right now. They just took a series from Florida State, another very strong ACC team. He's got 6 homers. He's got an OPS over 1. He's been making a bunch of incredible defensive plays. I think he's robbed at least 2 homers this year. I've seen him make multiple diving catches already. I will be the first to admit that I was a bit skeptical when he chose not to sign with the Orioles. I know it was late in the draft, and the bonus money isn't quite where you would go if you got drafted higher. But he is showing right now that he is for real, and I think an MLB team is gonna, see the numbers he's putting up, the competition that he's facing, and give him a shot. And I think he's, as a 5th year, he's probably 23-ish right now. It's gonna be one of those things where once he gets picked, he might legitimately just go straight to AA. I mean, if you're that age, they kind of have to, might be like a sink or swim type thing, where he's either gonna go to AA or just like a quick stint in high A before he gets the chance. But I'm very excited for the future of his baseball career. But for right now, I know there's only one word on his mind, and it's not draft. It's Omaha. When you have a team like this Clemson team, to understand that you have a chance to go win a national championship, and everything else from there will follow. Especially you perform on the big stage, and things can go pretty well for you. Let's move on here. We're going down to the D3 level here. We got Steven DiBattista. He's a Bonner alum, and he's just been incredible. In his last 3 starts, 8 shutout innings versus Ursinus, 7 shutout innings versus Marywood, and 9-inning complete game against Centenary with 2 runs allowed. He has a 1.85 ERA. He's 5-0 on the season. If you're an Immaculata guy, it's just like, he's your dude. He goes out there and performs every game. And, there's a difference between a guy like, we'll put in MLB terms, like Blake Snell, who's only going to go 5 or 6 innings and be dominant, and then a guy like Zach Wheeler, who, hey, we're going to send him out there, and he's going to give us, 7 innings no matter what, and it's going to be a chance for us to win the game. So good for Steven. I believe he's a senior there. I feel like we've been writing about him for a long time now. But speaking of St. Joe's, we were talking about St. Joe's a little bit earlier. Dom Pacone, he had 10 strikeouts in 5 innings against Kent State for the St. Joe's Hawks. He started his career at Rhode Island. He switched to St. Joe's, and he's got nasty stuff. He started his season numbers overall don't look incredible because his first start of the year didn't go great, and that kind of just like led those season numbers to kind of be inflated. But he was fantastic in that game, and hard not to be happy about that if you're Dom. 10 strikeouts in 5 innings is filthy. We're going to talk real quick about a freshman, Josh Lillis, who spent the fall at Misericordia, came back home to Delco. He's a Sun Valley guy. He's now playing at Newman. First career start a couple weeks back, he had 12 strikeouts. But in this most recent one, 7 shutout innings with 6 Ks against Marymount. 2 starts, 18 strikeouts, a total of, I think, 13 shutout innings. I would not be surprised if he's a guy that could hit the portal at some point. Just judging from my own personal experience of him striking me out, I can definitely say with full confidence that his stuff is gross. If you can throw and not only throw, but locate a splitter at this level, the D3, like Delco League, like whatever level, it's going to be successful. And after he just dominated at Sun Valley last year, this success is not a surprise for me. All right, last college baseball guy we're going to talk about is Mike Hooker. He is a Ridley alum. He pitches for DeSales, which I'm going to be honest, I have absolutely no idea where DeSales is. We got a couple DeSales guys. We got Jeremy Stranix, Mike Happersett. I know we probably have one more here. Let me see if I can pull that out because I don't want to miss anybody. Let's see. Jeremy Stranix, Delco. We got Frank Perotti. That's who I was thinking of from O'Hara. That's our last guy. So it looks like DeSales is, I feel like it's one of those just like middle of nowhere. Yeah, Center Valley, PA. I've never heard of that before. Center Valley, PA. Sure, why not? I love it. He went 7 shutout innings against Lebanon Valley. He's got, in 23.2 innings, he's got an ERA of 1.52, which will more than play here. So shout out our Delco guys over at DeSales. All right, so that is our college talk. I want to talk very, very briefly about the Phillies. This is, like I said, this is being recorded Saturday afternoon. So at this point, they're 0-1. They just got smoked by the Braves. Their bullpen was atrocious. And the number one thing I have to say is Phillies fans need to relax. They need to relax. I mean, everyone, in all my group chats or on the internet are already saying, season's over. They're not doing anything with this bullpen. Fire Rob Thompson. And it's just like, to quote Aaron Rodgers, like, relax. If this game happened in June, it'd be like, all right, we'll put it behind us. I will say the one frustrating thing that it seems like it's not changed from last year is Nick Castellanos with the low and away sliders. I mean, they could literally tell him that, hey, we're going to throw this pitch in the dirt, and it just seems like he's still going to swing, which is so frustrating. And I don't know. I think that it's – I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, in the Braves, he was the best player in that Braves series last year. He was the best player, alive. I mean, he hit back-to-back 2 home run games, right? Against the Diamondbacks, he was like 0 for 25, right? So he's the one guy I'm definitely concerned about. I think the bullpen, listen, like Jose Alvarado was incredible last year. He had one blow-up outing where he was a bit wild on command, right? Connor Brogdon, once Orion Kirkering gets back, have fun in Lehigh Valley, bud. And I still love Jeff Hoffman. I think that this bullpen, I think that MLB network graphic that said we were the best bullpen in the league was crazy. But with that being said, don't forget what this Phillies bullpen did in the playoffs last year outside of Craig Kimbrell, right? Like, they went into Atlanta in game 1 of that series and pulled Ranger after like 4 innings, and they won a bullpen game with a shutout. So I'm not very concerned about the bullpen. I think maybe Hoffman should have been brought in to face Adam Duvall, but I'm hoping by the time this episode is out, the Phils took those final 2 games of the series. I'll be there Sunday, so at the very least, win one while I'm there. That would be nice. But as mentioned, this is going to be a shorter episode today. I didn't really have as much to talk about based on the fact that, A, Ben's not here, and B, Wednesday and Thursday got rained out, and there was really nothing scheduled for Friday, but when we are in studio next week, we are going to have a boatload to talk about. So I appreciate everybody that tuned in for this episode. Make sure to follow us on all social media. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Shout out producer Rob for hooking us up, as always, and we thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.